Chapter 7. Ella. Quickly scanning the room, Ella found her stepsister lurking at the edge of the dance floor, her eyes fixed on the prince. Ella began to fight her way through the crowd again, sliding into a spot near her stepsister just as the dancing couples made their final bows before exiting the floor. "Your Highness!" Cynthia called out, waving a hand. In the other, she held a glass of wine. "Your Highness!" Despite her calls, no gentleman headed her direction. Ella couldn't see her face, but she could imagine the pout that covered it. The other girl began to walk away, elbowing people out of her way as she went. Ella's progress was slower, but she was able to keep Cynthia within sight. Cynthia stopped and stood still for a minute or two, looking off in the direction she had been walking, and then turned her head as if following someone's trail. The music started back up, and when the dance was about halfway through, she spun on her heel and stormed back toward the refreshments. Startled, Ella turned as well, ducking to the side as quickly as she could. Thankfully, her disguise was sufficient for a passing glance. She waited until Cynthia was several paces ahead before cautiously venturing after her again. She wasn't close enough to hear the conversation when Cynthia stomped up to her mother and sister, but Ella could see Cynthia's wide hand gestures. Slowly, cautiously, she worked her way closer, making sure to always keep another guest between her face and the members of her household. "You must have patience, Cynthia," stepmother calmly said. Calmly, but with an edge of frustration, Ella thought. "It may take a little time to gain his notice." "But every time he comes off the floor, he returns to it with a different girl," Cynthia whined. "What if now that he's danced with me, he won't look at me again?" "Looking at you is not the same as speaking with you, Cynthia," stepmother replied tersely. "He has not refused to acknowledge girls with whom he has already danced." "But how am I to make him choose me if he won't dance with me?" "All it takes is a sip." Having barely caught that last statement, Ella moved a little closer. "Once he has taken it, convincing him to dance with you will not be a problem." "If it works," Cynthia grumbled. "If it doesn't kill him first," Diana mumbled in reply. "Enough, Diana," stepmother snapped. "As I have already told you, it only works if Cynthia drinks from it too, and you have seen her do so. If it was going to harm him, it would have harmed her." Placing a hand on her chest, Ella closed her eyes, relieved that the prince wouldn't be hurt. However, it sounded like they believed the drink would help Cynthia catch him. But how? Her question seemed destined to be unanswered. Ella continued to eavesdrop throughout the rest of that dance and the next, but she heard nothing useful. After that, stepmother's irritated prodding drove Cynthia back to haunting the edges of the floor. Ella followed her again. Surely a drink couldn't win the prince against his will, but shouldn't Ella stop it if she could, even if he wasn't in any real danger? Another dance ended, and once again Cynthia called out to the prince, trying to catch his attention. Once again Ella trailed after her, taking care to avoid Cynthia's retreat this time. "I thought you weren't interested in catching a prince." The voice caught her by surprise. Spinning, she found Mike standing behind her with a scowl on his face. She blinked at him. "I'm not." "Oh, no?" he responded sarcastically. "Then why are you following him?" "Following him? Oh," she gave Mike an apologetic grin. "I suppose technically I was, but only because I was following my stepsister and she was following him." He crossed his arms over his chest. "And why were you following her?" "Because she—" She couldn't tell Mike that her stepsister was trying to give the prince a love potion. "Because she what?" he challenged. "It will sound silly," she replied, cringing. "Try me." How to say it? "She wants the prince to accept a drink from her. I believe she put something in it. Nothing that will hurt him," she hurried to add when his face darkened. "She drank some herself, so it can't be bad. It's supposed to make him want—" He raised an eyebrow at her. "I told you it would sound silly." He watched her for a minute, eyes tracing her face as if gauging her sincerity. The music for the next song began, but Ella didn't take her eyes from Mike. Cynthia's nonsense didn't matter right now. He thought she was prince hunting, and she needed him to know she wasn't. Finally, one corner of his mouth curved up as he glanced away.
If it makes you feel better, he is unlikely to take a drink from a stranger.
Even at a ball? Ella asked in surprise. Even from a girl with whom he has danced? Mike nodded, his eyes returning to the dance floor.
He prefers not to have his wits dulled, especially tonight with all of these women chasing him.
Of course. That must be what her stepmother had given Cynthia, something that would affect the prince's thinking. She didn't understand why Cynthia had to drink it too, but that hardly mattered. She smiled, then looked thoughtfully at Mike. You seem to know a lot about how he thinks. His wide eyes shot back to hers, his eyebrows aiming for his hairline. He considered her for a few moments.
I suppose I do. We've been friends for most of our lives.
I suppose that explains why you've attended so many balls, then, she mused. I did wonder how a commoner would be experienced in them. He smirked.
Something like that.
They fell into silence. Mike's eyes drifted back to the dancers. Ella tried not to stare at him. Had her unnecessary concern for a stranger's welfare ruined her only chance? As the song wound to a close, he drew his attention from the floor and offered his hand.
I believe I promised you another dance. Would you do me the honor?
When they finished the dance, he asked for another, and then another. As the night progressed, Ella grew more comfortable with the steps and stumbled less often. They spent some of the time talking, some of it simply enjoying the movement of the dance or staring into each other's eyes. The longer they danced, the more certain Ella was that Mike held her future. They didn't dance every song. During one break, a young brunette wearing an elaborate purple gown walked past them. She glanced over, then did a double take. She opened her mouth as her wide eyes darted from Mike to Ella and back again.
What are?
She twisted her head to search the dance floor.
I thought...
But he's...
Good evening, Lady Charlotte,
Mike said politely, offering a slight dip of his head.
Excuse us.
Then he tucked Ella's arm into his elbow and dragged her rapidly away. Who was that? Ella asked, looking back over her shoulder. The other woman stood where they had left her, head tilted slightly and a crease in her forehead.
Just a lady of the court, Mike replied dismissively. A duke's daughter with more confidence than sense of the appropriate.
The interaction still confused her, but she didn't press for details. It wasn't her place to worry about such things, nor did she wish to encourage Mike to gossip. She was sure a duke's daughter could make trouble for him. Half an hour later, she was floating on a dream. The evening had been one beautiful tapestry of sweet feelings, woven with the strains of music that directed their steps. Cynthia could have the prince if she wanted him. As long as Ella could have Mike, nothing else mattered.
Would you marry a prince?
Mike asked abruptly. Ella felt her eyebrows draw together. I already told you that I didn't come here to catch him.
I know that, he replied with a slight shake of his head. I didn't ask if you were trying to marry a prince. I asked if you would be willing to marry one.
I told you, I don't care about titles. She tilted her head, wondering what this was about. Why would I want to marry the prince when I've never met him?
Yes, but what if you had? He pressed. If you liked him, would his title chase you away?
I've never dreamed of being a princess, she said slowly, searching his eyes. Had this been nothing more than finding a nice girl for his friend? But I suppose I...
Bong.
Ella froze. Wrapped up in Mike and the bliss of his presence, she had missed the chimes earlier in the evening. What time is it? She asked frantically, twisting her head in search of a clock.
Midnight, I believe,
Mike replied with a frown in his voice.
Bong.
I have to go, she gasped out, setting her hands on his chest and shoving away from him. She glimpsed his puzzled expression as he released her, but she didn't stop to agonize over it. Thomas had said not a minute past. She couldn't risk her tardiness causing trouble with his buyer.
Ella, what's wrong? Where are you going?
She ignored him, finding the strength of will to elbow people aside when necessary. She had to reach the exit.
Bong.
She was running out of time. Ella, a familiar voice said. I know an Ella. If Mike introduced her to the prince, stepmother would sabotage it. She would risk her own daughter's chance if it meant ruining Ella's. If Mike didn't want her for himself, there was no point. Bong. She cleared the doors to the ballroom and raced off down the hall, ignoring the startled looks of the footmen that she passed. Thankfully, none of them interfered with her flight.
Ella, wait!
From the desperation in his voice, maybe she had misunderstood. Maybe he would be willing to keep her if the prince didn't want her. But she couldn't take that chance, not when Thomas would pay the price as well. So she kept running. Bong. When she reached the stairs outside, she tripped, practically falling down the first two. She threw herself against the stone railing to catch her balance, then pushed off and continued down the stairs a little more slowly. Her foot somehow caught on the hem of her dress, and she stumbled again, this time slamming into the unforgiving stone steps as one of her slippers flew from her foot. Hoping desperately that she hadn't damaged the dress, she picked herself up and reached for the shoe.
Ella!
Looking up, she saw Mike barreling through the front doors. Bong. If Mike caught her, he would try to take her back inside. She could explain, but that would take too long. Abandoning the shoe, she darted down the final steps and toward the carriage waiting at the bottom.
I was beginning to think you wouldn't make it,
Thomas said as he jumped off the box. Looking behind her, he frowned.
Is everything all right?
Ella could feel the tears on her face, but she stubbornly ignored them. It's fine.
But
if you want to leave on time, Thomas, he can't catch me, she said urgently as she hoisted herself into the carriage.
Are you sure? We might be able to...
He cut off, eyes turning worried as he took in her face.
Never mind, you're right. We need to go.
With that, he threw the carriage door closed and leaped to the box with an agility that belied his age. Wondering what he had seen, Ella reached a hand to her face as the carriage lurched forward. My mask! She gasped. She was startled to feel a rough surface under her fingers. When she pulled it off to examine it, it was crumpled and black, nothing like when Thomas had put it on her. Bong.
Ella!
Mike's voice was much quieter this time, but she still heard it. She turned back as they rolled through the gates, taking one final look at the young man that she had hoped would set her free.